To those of you who've been standing, I'm only going to read for another 10 minutes or so. I've been standing too, so I know what you feel like. Let me start by reading some haiku. These are called Lone Star Haiku. And a number of years ago, my friend Bill Davis, who is here, reminded me of W.S. Merwin's famous translation of haiku. He said, haiku is a poem in 3 lines of 5, 7, and 5 syllables each, and written in Japanese. And the good point of that is that why should we in English follow the prosodic rules of another language? So I've totally ignored. No, I haven't totally ignored, but again, trying to write in the spirit of Japanese haiku without slavishly following the rules. Lone Star Haiku, a whole bunch of them in this book, but I'm just going to give you a sample. Bats blanket the dark river, now spiraling up the white buildings. A bruised peach, moon caught in the twists of flowerless wisteria. Boy in the piney woods sneezing, charred trunks everywhere. What do you call rocket wells? Do you have a term for that? What pump oil? In this poem, they're called oil donkeys. Is that a phrase you use? Oil donkeys pump a stubbled field, sandhill cranes are grazing. This one is called Enchanted Rock. Asleep on my own right hand, something winging above the bare dome. This one is called Lano Estacado. Tumbleweed, stumbling over tumble-down stones. No bridge, the sun near setting, the arroyo surging. A fall river, not fast enough to float even a leaf. This one is called Fulton Beach. I don't know if they were spared, were they? With the rockport stuff. Fulton Beach. The faster the dachshund's legs, the longer the heron's stride into flight. Outran the dachshund every time. This poem, this haiku, fastens on the idea that the 3 first words in the haiku are both singular and plural. Hail, haiku, dear. We salute all y'all's singular plurality. Bee cave. No bees hum here, only Galleria neon. Microwave towers. Little wren below my window, if you were dog-sized, you'd be deafening. Childhood. This is a double haiku. Childhood. She's in her car seat, batting cobwebs of sunlight that stick to her face, only to cry when we turn a corner and they're gone. And this one is, this is a four-piece haiku, and it's a translation of a poem by the French poet Guy. I don't know what landscape he was thinking about when he wrote this, but to me, it's called Hill Country. Country of hard scrabble, scrub brush, outcrop chafed by drought. Landscape like an angry throat, hurting for milk. Woman with no man, ridgeline like a scalded ant mound. Flat-bellied earth, music for brasses, sheriff-faced. There are no youngsters here, right? Fragility of summer. Sometimes in July, when my front lawn is much greener than it is usually in July, I say, almost without thinking, how green my lawn is. The way at other times I might say, motherfucker. Just to clear my palate. To wrap my mind around things, or the directions things take on those days when mint leaves turn blue beneath an emerald sky. This next poem is a poem that I started to write when I realized that the great 20th century poet Wallace Stevens had taken a train trip from Hartford, Connecticut, where he worked in the insurance business, across the country through Chicago, and then up through southern Wisconsin, where the railway used to run, but stopped. The railroad stopped many, many years ago. And then he continued up to Minneapolis, where he had a business deal. And I realized that he must have passed by my father's farm. And so, well, I don't know if he did or not, but it pleased me to imagine that one of my favorite poets was passing by the homestead. And if you know a little bit about Stevens, this may become more interesting, but it's not really about him anyway. It's called The Warmth of Winter. Wallace Stevens is on a train now in the foremost Pullman, taking him to St. Paul, that frozen river city, the one that one must cross the river of rivers to enter. He has just placed a round jar of bootleg back into his valise, picked up on the stopover in Chicago. This would have been during the Prohibition. This train will not be stopping tonight in Clinton or Shapir or anywhere else the rail lines have begun bypassing forever. And by the time the train has reached the area called Driftless, bypassed by glaciers, Wallace Stevens, surety attorney, will be asleep. In the roomy winter dusk, my father hasn't finished milking yet. The oil lamps swing in the crisp breeze, passing through the cracks in the timbers and freshening the barn a bit. For electricity will not light this part of rural America for another decade. Another fact of life to check against its prologues to what is possible. My father has spent the last warmth of this winter afternoon in the spring house, mending tackle, because here the temperature is always like the early Wisconsin spring. And so his gloves are off as he makes the harness leather answer to the pull of stitch, the ebullience of lanolin that keeps the skin of his hands smooth and limber 75 years later, even when it's become parchment thin. He walks from milking now toward the house of darkened windows, past snowfields lowering around him like a stage set, backlit, as it were, by the faint overhead auroras. He is not yet afraid of global depression and war, genocide, renal failure, the real theater of the century he will live the fullness of. Perhaps he pictures a son listening after all the lights have failed to a train passing, like the one whose horn my father has lifted his head just now to hear. Because the coach of my Austin tennis league team is in the audience tonight, I want to read this poem. It's about Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher and theologian, and other things. Pascal loved two things that I love, wine and tennis. and used those concepts to sort of think through his own faith, his own theology, his own credo. So this poem is called The 1,000 Fragments. It's a work that's sometimes translated into English as pensées, thoughts. The poem begins with a couple of quotations from Pascal. First of all, you say I have no new ideas, but the same words, differently arranged, have different meanings. As in tennis, both players hit the same ball, but one places it better with more spin. Deny a man wine, and he won't find truth. Give him too much, same. Belief in God is a wise wager. Winning, you win all. Losing, you lose nothing. Man's grandeur is knowing himself to be miserable. So here's the poem. From his house on Faubourg Saint-Michel, abutting a garden between a pair of courts, the pale geometrician turned theologian explores the mathematical probability of his belief as he pursues the dream of service. How good a bet is God? How does tennis help us reckon his value? Also a wager of faith, viniculture welcomes the conversion miracle of the grape, that trick which leaves the taste of cherry, grass, tobacco, dust. Which is why grapes terrify, as do the interstellar darknesses, or a drop shot dying at your feet. That's what we mean by terroir, the arousal of rosé blushes from white juice, galactic black from red. When unattended by novitiates, Blaise Pascal practices his backhand, the torque part, how to check the body's natural tendency to rotate so that the arm straightens, accelerates from the shoulder. The service, however, is more primal, an oppositional gesture, the way a man stays happy in his misery so long as he denies the providence he doesn't know is his already, precisely because he doubts it. To finger the ball, to palm the racket, is to bear the cross of winning, which is thanks to the desire not to lose. Tossing the ball efficiently high, he applauds the Lord for his own abjuration of him. Isn't this the lack of faith that surprises us into truth? He muses, thinking himself no better than a beast trampling the vintage, his mind a scarecrow warding the warblers off the grapes. Belief will spare us, he concludes, by how it breathes into our resistance to it, urgings in the form of words, new, unthinkable ideas that seem to make the moving ball hover, hittable now, though we think we aren't yet close enough to know it. As for the fragments, real questions require 1,000 answers. When faith, as it looks through death, witnesses one's own fear of it standing across the net, a wise man, raising his glass or racket, bets on eternity as giving him the better odds, though he may still hit every ball with spin. Now, I want to finish with the most difficult writing assignment I've ever been given. And this was, I'm reading this in part because my daughter is expecting within a few weeks her third child, and my niece is expecting a month later her second child, and our dear friend Rebecca Markovitz has just had her first child, so there's a lot of children in play. My daughter came up to me and said, "Daddy, would you write a poem for our wedding?" And I said, "What can you say?" I said, "Sure." But this really was hard, because you can't fail. And you know that they're going to say thanks, it's really, really great, even if it sucks. So my daughter married a young Australian lad who's an avid sailor like his father. And the poem recounts a trip we took on their catamaran sailing boat. And refers to the history of relationships between dolphins and people. You know, dolphins are historically friendly to people. It was a dolphin that rescued Orion. So anyway, the poem is an epithalamion, which is a Greek word for wedding poem, called Summoning Dolphins. A wedding poem, or epithalamion, which is the Greek for it, is not hard, really, to write. Not much harder, say, than epithalamion is to say. But it's how to start that's difficult, and not for any reason you might expect, such as the obviously ticklish issue of where marriage fits in the parabolic arc between affection and need, between desiring and caring, between the wish to be like the one you love and the wish to be anything but. The radiant simulacra of true selfness, the terrible exactitudes of mere selfhood, knowing as you do how all that has been said already about love and marriage especially, may conquer all. All right then, here's my story. You're sailing somewhere in the South Coral Sea. Say you've come there having just seen South Pacific at Lincoln Center. Now you are entering a Narrows, which is fjord-like, volcano-rimmed, shallow enough for the captain to say, "Hold tight, mates, we may touch bottom." And you spot a fin. It's a friendly one, you're told. Not all of them in the South Pacific are. A fin, it turns out, of the bottlenose, the dolphin the Aborigines trained to herd shoals of fish into their tow nets. And a young man, handsome in the way of mariners, a father's true son, tries summoning more of them, beating his hand again and again on the hull of the catamaran. But today, this text messaging of the human speaks to no porpoise. Even the lone fin vanishes. Picture now a little girl growing up in another place altogether, who couldn't be told the kinds of things she couldn't believe were true. How in Australia, one might say to her, the stars are different, come clustered differently from the ones she sees. How water there drains in the other direction, and gum trees do not grow the kind of gumballs she can chew. How a dolphin is a mammal, not a fish, and therefore more like her with womb and lungs than like the kind with dorsal fins. And when at last the time came, and she was ready to relinquish the freedom of redoubtable belief to the tyranny of evidence, her way of doing so was to look you kindly in the eye, to smile even, and to say, as she turned away, "Well, all right then." Dolphins live above the evidence of water. They also live beneath the evidence of air. They speak a language all their own, one emitting higher frequencies, even while admitting deeper soundings. Delphinus is the Greek for them, and they were sacred to Apollo, whose shrine at Delphi, named for them, is where, in the fullness of time, for better or worse, all sailors came who sought the truth. Although the oracle spoke to them there, delirious echoings in high-pitched, maimed hexameters like these, and often too in tears, the saltiest kind, those born of joy. Well, all right then. Listen. You may hear the hull of today begin resounding. All of us are all here. Thank you.